Hey y'all, and welcome back to my channel. I apologize, my voice is a little raspy. I'm getting over a cold, but I wanted to make sure that I got this tutorial out for y'all. We're going to be doing this really pretty beach resin board. Some of you may have saw, but I started one a while back with the FLIPN Awesome Paints from CRYSTALAC. Here's a little clip of it. It was more of a pastel color, and it turned out so pretty, except when I added my waves on, I totally ruined it. It was awful. So here I am remaking it, and I'm going to use the COLORFLEX paints from ARTISTRY this time because I wanted them to be a little bit brighter, and these are slightly more pigmented than the FLIPN Awesome paints, but I wanted to show you both so you can decide which one you would prefer to use more. I got this cute little board from Hobby Lobby, and I believe it was part of their Valentine's Day collection, but they have recently put out their Spring Shop collection, and they have tons of boards to choose from, so you can definitely get that from there, or I can stack one from TJ Maxx, Home Goods, stores like that. I'm using a makeup brush to apply my paint so it goes on nice and smooth, and it also really helps blend my colors together. And as you can see as I go through this, the only time that I washed my brush off was between the transition from blue to yellow. Yellow is a really difficult color, so I applied my yellow first and then blended it up into my blue. All other colors I start at the bottom or right in the center of where my previous color stopped and just blend those colors together and then work my way down the board as I go. I will of course list all of the colors that I'm using down below for y'all. I am going through them pretty quickly in this tutorial because it is going to be a lengthy one, so I didn't want to spend too much time showing each individual color and going through those steps. Once I finished this first layer, I did allow it to dry. If you use a heat gun or some sort of space heater to help dry your paints, make sure that your board is nice and cool before you go back in with your second coat so your paints don't dry quickly if there's heat coming from your board. And normally when I am making these types of boards, I will leave about half of it at the bottom for it to be able to use for food purposes. This is a very small one, and I actually decided to cover the entire board. You see, I'm trying to, I guess, sort of make a boundary for where my wave is gonna go. And then when I went in with my second coat, I just brought that pink just about all the way down so it would have a nice transition from the gold that we're using for our sand. I'm using Artistry's 1:1 ratio fast set for my glitter application. I really like this because it's going to allow me to move quickly into my next steps since it will dry so quickly. I just spread that all over the board, and I would say I used about 2 milliliters of epoxy. Once I finished spreading that epoxy around really thin, I did allow it to sit for a couple of minutes just so it can level out before we started adding on our glitter. The first glitter that we are using is Queen Bee from PDB Creative Studio. It's a really beautiful gold with some opals mixed in, and it really blends well with any other color that you're using. I applied it a little heavier towards the bottom and then pulled my shaker up about a foot away from the board and lightly sprinkled it. I'm going to do that with each of my colors, just very lightly sprinkling the glitter on for each color section so I can map out how I want my glitter to go. We do already have the board painted these colors to match, but it's always important to do a very light application at first, and then you can build up your coverage. This is going to ensure that you have a really nice ombre and you don't have any harsh lines transitioning from one color to the next. And I don't know about y'all, but yellow is a very, very difficult color to ombre. It's a hard one to paint for me, and it's a hard one to ombre glitter. So go super light with your yellow in the colors before and after, and you can just gradually build those up so you have a really nice transition from your colors. Of course, I will also have all of these colors listed below for y'all, but we did use Valley Girl for the pink, Callisto for the orange, Capella for yellow. We are using Pavo now for the lighter, brighter blue, and Night King is our dark blue that goes on the top. I absolutely love all of these colors together. They're just so beautiful, and it reminds me of summer and the beach and just makes me so ready for the warmer weather. Once I had all of my initial layer blended, then I went over this 2 to 3 more times depending on how much I needed to add into each area. I'm going to let this play through so you can see how I added that second layer of glitter. Just be sure if you do this design or your ombreing colors, whether it be on a board or a tumbler, don't rush and take your time. It is very much worth it. Once I finished with all of my colors, I stood my board up and just tapped the excess glitter off. I allowed that to dry for about 4 to 6 hours and then spray sealed twice with Rust-Oleum matte clear coat. I got these really cool levelers from Artistry. It helps when you're doing boards or larger projects like this to get them level even if your table is not. They're adjustable. And then I just take my level and put it on top to make sure that it is nice and flat, and my epoxy is going to stay where I put it. So for this layer, I am using Artistry's 1:1 ratio fast set. I'm doing this because I want this to also dry quickly and be ready for the next layer and for me to add on my waves. So I'm just spreading this around. I'm going to the edges, but not over the edges. If you go over it, it's fine. Just wipe off whatever excess you can. I did at one point in this tutorial try to add on some tape, and my tape was old, so it didn't work. So at the end of the video, I am going to show you how to remove any excess epoxy that goes over the side. Once I applied my epoxy, I just went over with my torch to pop any micro bubbles, and I allowed this to dry overnight, and then I very lightly sanded around the edges and over top of my glitter to make sure that I got all of the lumps and bumps out and it was nice and smooth. So for this second layer of epoxy, I am using Artistry's regular epoxy. I want a longer work time and a longer dry time so that I can add on my waves and use more heat, where if I were using a fast set, the heat from my heat gun that we're using would cause it to set up really quickly and it would just make a complete mess. So make sure that you use a regular epoxy and not a fast set for this step. And you may be able to see I did try to tape off my edges in this step, but the tape was old and it actually left a residue behind and come off in multiple places. So epoxy ran over the edges anyway, and I will show you later how to clean that up. So I poured about ½ an ounce of epoxy into a smaller cup. Artistry has an awesome wave kit, and you use 1 to 2 pumps per ½ ounce of epoxy to get really nice, bright and vibrant waves. We used 2 pumps for this, and I just mixed that up really well and spreaded it on where I wanted my waves to end. Once I had my little streak on, I took my heat gun, I tilted my board back so that the waves would flow towards the top, and just applied a little bit of heat to each little section of my waves to push that up and blend them out. If it blends them out too much or you need more color, you could just go back in with your white epoxy and do those steps all over again, and it will give you a brighter wave. And then once you have those blended really well, you just take the sea spray. It's sort of like a cell activator. It creates all of those little cells that you see in a real beach wave, and then you just allow that to dry. Once that is dry, you can go in with your second layer and layer on another wave. You don't have to do this step. You can make as many layers of waves as you want, but I really wanted to add on an additional one on top of this so it looks more realistic. I'm no professional at this by any means. As I said, I ruined the first board that I attempted, but this gives you a good idea of how these waves are made, and I do encourage, check out other tutorials if you are wanting to make a project like this. Glazed Epoxy is a really awesome YouTube channel to check out. She uses the same kit and makes some amazing waves using it. So definitely check her out if you want to make one of these as well. Alright, so I let that dry overnight, and now we are going to remove all of the excess epoxy that has fallen over the sides. To remove the excess epoxy, I am just applying some heat with my heat gun, and then I take my craft knife where the blade is straight up and down with the board and just scrape it off. I should have been wearing gloves with this, and also make sure that you are wearing your respirator because you are heating the epoxy, so fumes can still come off of it when you are heating it up to its breaking point. And for the sides, I'm being really careful in holding my heat gun at an angle so I don't heat up the design on the top of the board. And I'm doing the same thing, just scraping that off. If there's a little bit left behind, do not worry because I do go in with some sandpaper and give a very nice finish on the edges. Once you have went all the way around your board and got it nice and clean, then take a cloth and just wipe all of that excess little scraps of epoxy off, and then you can go in with your sandpaper. If you have a lot left behind that you are needing to get off, then use a lower grit sandpaper. Just be very careful as to not touch the top of your board where your design is. Go around the edges and then work your way down to a higher grit so the edges are nice and smooth. And then you can take a food safe oil or linseed oil and go around the edges and the back side of your board to restore its nice finish. I know this question is going to come up, so I'm going to go ahead and address it. The epoxy I use, Artistry, does meet the FDA standards for food safety. However, that is after it has reached its full curing point, and also it cannot be used as a cutting board because we don't want bits of epoxy coming up in anyone's food, and for cool foods only. I really love how this board turned out. It takes me straight to the beach and the summer weather. I can't wait. Follow us on Instagram and join our Facebook group for additional tips and tricks and giveaways. And don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel. Hit the little bell in the corner to be notified anytime a new tutorial drops. Thank you all so much, and we will see you next time.